In the world called Yorum, dungeons and monsters are a common sight. Alongside them, there are powers and people with special abilities, capable of facing dangerous challenges. To handle this, there's an explorer association that manages its members and sends them on missions. Among them is a group known as the Seven Stars. This is one of the most respected explorer groups in Yorum, and one of its members is Nana, codenamed Bright Light, a battle-hardened warrior. She joined the group to help her brother, who had taken care of her all his life. Her childhood was rough, and she saw the explorer path as a chance to improve her life. However, for her brother and the protagonist of this story, his world is about to be shaken, and he will have to deal with something he never imagined. Our story begins with an intense battle. A young warrior faces off against giant insects in a dungeon, but she isn't doing too well. The insects have the numbers advantage, since they multiply when they start losing. With this numerical edge, they strike, and that makes the girl's job even harder than it already was. Suddenly, she's caught off guard, struck head-on by one of the insects, and so she crashes to the ground, nearly powerless. On the verge of passing out, she apologizes to her brother, because once she made a promise to him, but now she won't be able to keep it. Sometime later, on a calm day in the city, Ru, the girl's brother, walks home after doing some shopping. Then one of his friends approaches him, saying he bought a lot of food, and asks if today is the day his sister Nana comes back. Ru replies yes, since she's returning from an expedition that started days ago. The protagonist asks how his friend's hunter life is going. Koji Shimura says it's going great, and he's becoming a better healer every day. Then he says goodbye, mentioning he needs to go to work. Meanwhile, the others say Ru has it easy while his sister risks her life in dungeons, and they think it's unfair that he has a relative who's part of the Seven Stars. That's when Kuji scolds them, saying that in the past, Nana lived in the slum and was starving, until Ru helped her and pulled her out of that life. On top of that, both of them had to survive for a long time by scavenging for food and living in the shadows. The others understand, but still think Ru lives off his sister and doesn't deserve the life he has, claiming that if she dies, Ru will probably go back to that life of poverty. Meanwhile, the protagonist gets home and starts prepping the ingredients he bought. He thinks his sister will be back soon, so he hurries to get the meal ready, and so he does, trying to be as fast as possible. But even then, he still puts care into the preparation, until finally Ru finishes cooking. But since his sister hasn't arrived yet, he finds it strange that she's late. It's already well past the time she was supposed to return. Hours pass, and Ru ends up falling asleep at the kitchen table, until he wakes up to a phone call. When he answers, the person on the other end says they're from the Explorer Association and want to speak with a family member of Nana. Then, the person sadly informs him that Nana died on her last expedition. She was attacked by a monster and found 2 hours ago. Ru gets deeply upset by the news, but the association worker tells him to keep it confidential, since it would be bad for them if people found out that a Seven Stars member died in a dungeon. Lastly, they say Ru will receive monetary compensation and some benefits within a month due to the incident. After ending the call, the protagonist is devastated. He never expected to lose his sister this way. The moments they shared flashed through Ru's mind. Since they were young, Nana would always stir up trouble, until one day she decided to channel that energy into something useful and joined the Explorer Association. Nana knew she could trust her brother to handle things while she worked away from home, and she promised that nothing would ever happen to her, so her brother didn't need to worry. However, the protagonist remembers that his sister said she was going to an A-rank dungeon, but over the phone they said she was in an S-rank dungeon. He knows that the association uses a special program to investigate causes when something happens in an S-class dungeon or above, especially when it involves a 7 stars dungeon. But this time, they skipped the program and contacted the family directly. So Ru wonders if they figured out what happened inside an S-rank dungeon in just 2 hours. 5 days later, at the Explorers Association, Ru goes there to clarify a few things. He meets with one of the organization's leaders named Rakudo Hautu, who asks Ru if he still has any questions since their phone call. The protagonist simply replies that he wants to become an explorer. Rakudo Hautu is surprised by the answer. He then says that becoming an explorer is dangerous. Not only that, but he adds that Ru has no abilities, therefore he isn't qualified for the job. He also says that if Ru's sister were still alive, she'd want to see him live peacefully, not in a situation like this. However, the protagonist says that according to the Explorers Association rules, a relative of an explorer can become one, regardless of ability, meaning he can become an explorer. Given that, the head of the association agrees and tells his secretary to handle the detail. Rakudo also says that regardless of what happens, Ru will always be welcome in their organization. The protagonist responds with a cold look, which leaves Rakudo quite worried about the boy's future. Either way, Ru is registered and receives his Explorer ID, but he doesn't seem happy about it. Earlier, Rakudo said that the person who was with Nana used a special item to escape, and as soon as they got out, Yoram began preparing a rescue team. They used a special item to check the situation inside the dungeon, but unfortunately, they didn't find her alive. Rue mentions that Nana said it was an A-rank dungeon, but Rakuto states that no, from what he heard, they were sent to a sealed S-rank dungeon, and maybe she lied so Rue wouldn't worry. The protagonist didn't accept that, and thinks there's no way his sister's sacrifice was some noble act. He wants to find out the truth, no matter what it takes. At another moment, outside a D-rank dungeon, a group of explorers prepares to enter. Some of them chat and try to guess what they'll find inside. Others just want to fight monsters and live an adventure. Either way, the whole group enters. Inside, some of them talk among themselves, until a rookie shows up trying to fit in. The more experienced ones talk about the dangers of the place, but say there's no use explaining, because the rookie will learn by seeing it for himself. Then they notice the protagonist standing alone, and they say he's a rookie too. One of the seniors tells the protagonist that if this is his first time, he should stick with them and not stray from sight. In the middle of this, they hear a scream coming from deep inside the dungeon, and everyone gets really scared. After all the yelling, the group wonders what they should do. They're there as support, and their job was only to accompany the main group. But now that the plan has backfired, they don't know how to respond, and they didn't even receive training for this. Upon hearing that, Rue thought he missed the training because he didn't go through the normal process, but found out there wasn't any training to begin with. Usually, explorers refer to combat specialists. Only those of rank D and above have the right to fight. Support explorers are made up of civilians and E-rank explorers, basically part-time workers who do some extra jobs in dungeons. Right then, the experienced explorers call for support, so they decide to head over, since they have a job to do. Once at the scene, they come across a few casualties, and the sight is nothing pleasant. The rookie even gets sick, until that irritates one of the experienced explorers. But one of his teammates grabs him by the arm, telling him he needs to calm down. She says for all the support team to stay together. And after that, the combat team leaves, letting support do their work. The rookie asks if he did something wrong. Rue replies that he was disrespectful to the dead and to their loved ones. With that, the rookie says it's his first time, and he couldn't control his reaction. The protagonist says the explorers knew that, which is why they didn't punish him. The rookie asks how Rue knows so much, since it's his first time too. Rue says he heard it from someone. He remembers a time when his sister was telling him about one of her expeditions. On that occasion, Nana said a rookie overestimated himself and was ambushed. Another support rookie saw the fallen body and vomited. A friend of the one who died got furious and punished that rookie. She tried to stop him, but it was too late. Rue said that such a punishment seemed excessive. His sister agreed but added that explorers always see support members as inferior. Back in the present, one of the guys tells the protagonist to stop standing around and start working. In response, Rue says the monster's body needs to be cleaned up. The senior says that as a rookie, Rue should start with something simpler. He also explains that to clear a dungeon, they need to destroy the core, and he points out the direction. But to break the core, they must first take down the guardian. No matter what kind of monster it is, its body lasts only 30 minutes after death. However, for guardians, the countdown starts only after the core is destroyed. The rookie asks why there are so many monster corpses lying around. One of them answers that they can't take the bodies out of the dungeons, but when defeating a guardian, there's a chance of obtaining weapons or gear. If lucky, maybe even a skill book. Rare items drop sometimes too. The senior says that if they care that much about loot, they should go ask the combat explorers. Another one says the dungeon will close 30 minutes after the core breaks, so they better hurry. After leaving, he says they'll hand over the loot, and the rookies can go home and will be paid within 3 days. He also adds that just because support doesn't fight, it doesn't mean it's safe, so he advises the rookies to train if they want to live longer, because if they can run fast, they'll survive longer. Unlike the other rookie, Rue becomes determined to grow stronger. 2 days after his first dungeon, Rakuto finds the protagonist and asks how the work has been. Rue replies that it's exhausting and dangerous. Rakuto then asks if the treasure didn't tempt him. The protagonist says none of it is worth risking his life for. After hearing that, Rakuto goes quiet in thought and says that Rue is a lot like his sister. He finds that kinda strange, because he claims that through his sister's legacy, Rue could live well for the rest of his life. So he asks what Rue's true goal is. Rue says he can't just relax living off his sister's inheritance, and he's sure Rakuto has heard all the rumors calling him trash, leeching off her. That's why he's tired of living while people whisper behind his back. Rakuto says her death was kept secret for a while, but eventually people will notice that Rue is the sole heir, and he says it's a good thing he wants to grow stronger on his own. And he has someone he wants to introduce him to. Charlie List meets the protagonist and says his old friend brought him another young trainee. Rakuto says this is the mentor he mentioned before and tells Rue he'll get stronger under him. Charlie looks the protagonist over and says he seems pretty weak, but Rakuto tells him he's the brother of Bright Light. With that, Charlie agrees to train him, but says this will be the last time he accepts a trainee like this. Rakuto says he trusts Charlie with this training. Then Rue introduces himself, but his trainer takes on a stricter tone. He says the protagonist is enjoying the privilege of the elite by training here. Then Charlie asks if the protagonist understands what that means. Rue responds that he's aware of what he's saying. Explorers are ranked from Class E to S, but above that, there's a superior rank called 7 stars. Those who belong to the elite have privileges within the organization, which even extend to their family, as long as the explorer is still alive. However, a new rule was added that benefits the protagonist, so he still has access to those privileges even though his sister has passed. This is a golden opportunity, so his trainer says he'll have to make a choice. But Rue asks what choice that would be. Charlie explains there are 3 types of training: attack, defense, and speed. He says that words alone won't cut it, so he'll demonstrate. After that, he uses a training dummy to demonstrate an attack. Then he does the same to show defense. And lastly, he demonstrates speed. With that done, he asks which one Rue prefers. The protagonist thinks it through and says he believes defense is the best option. At another time, in the middle of a park, the protagonist takes the opportunity to work out and goes for a run under the hot sun until he stops for a bit to rest. Since he's not used to it, he gets tired quickly and even wonders if this is really going to help him. Earlier, when he told his mentor he wanted to train in defense, Charlie praised his choice. He said his other students would pick attack in order to protect themselves, or would they choose speed to have more options for running or attacking? That's why they all died. Charlie says Rue can choose his own training routine, so he should make sure to strengthen his body. The protagonist asks if Charlie isn't going to train him. His mentor says it's useless if Rue runs out of breath after just a bit of running. He tells the protagonist to train on his own and gives him a deadline of 2 months. If he doesn't reach a minimum level, he won't care if he's the brother of Bright Light and will give up on him for good. Back to the present, Rue knows he can't give up, so he resumes running after his break. During the day, he trains his body, and at night he studies the enemy, using his computer to research as much information as possible. Rue wants to investigate more about his sister's death, so he intends to understand more about his enemy. He ends up realizing that mythical beasts are extremely powerful, and it's no wonder Nana was so stubborn about keeping him away from being an explorer and from dungeons. The next day, he resumes his routine. Some jealous people notice that Rue bought meat again, and not just that, they know he's been going to the rest station every day, a place for rich people, where they can heal their wounds and even recover from fatigue, and they don't understand how someone without even any abilities can live so well. For his part, the protagonist focuses on his training routine, and with each passing day, he stays strong. After the 2-month deadline, the protagonist shows satisfactory results, until one fine day he receives a visit from Mr. Koji, who's surprised to see the protagonist since he looks so different from the last time they saw each other. Koji praises the protagonist's training performance and says that for a moment he almost didn't recognize him. Then he asks Rue when his sister will return. He doesn't know about Nana's death, since Rue kept it secret at the association's request. Either way, he says that according to the association's people, she's on a mission abroad and won't return anytime soon. Rue tells his friend that they've known each other for a long time, so if he wants to ask something, there's no need to hesitate. Koji says Rue has been buying a lot of things lately, which is drawing attention, especially because many people can't even afford a piece of bread. And on top of that, he heard Rue has been going to the station every day. The protagonist asks if his friend thinks he's become a thief or something. Koji says that as long as Nan is around, that won't happen, but he heard that something bad happened to one of the 7 stars. Rue asks what that would be. His friend says he just overheard some high-ranking explorers talking. It seems the association wants to keep it secret, but there are people trying to find out what happened. With that, he tells Rue to be honest and asks again where Nana is. The protagonist says not to worry. After all, if something had happened to his sister, he wouldn't be able to live like this. Koji decides to trust his friend, because he knows the siblings have always taken care of each other, and apologizes for asking so many questions. Rue says he appreciates knowing his friend cares about him, and says he can stay for a snack, but Kuji says he'll leave it for next time, since he has something to take care of. After Kuji leaves the protagonist's house, Rue grabs his phone to make a call. The guy on the other end says he finally decided to call. Rue says he has something to ask. His contact says he called him 45 times over the past 2 months, and couldn't reach Rue. And now, out of nowhere, he decides to return the call, asking if this is about the 7 stars. Rue says yes, and asks what this person knows. The guy tells him to ask the association and says he'll only answer depending on Rue's attitude, but the protagonist hangs up the call. After that, he calls again, super pissed off. Rue says that if he says anything else weird, he'll ask his older sister. The man then says that one of the 7 stars is dead. He couldn't identify who it was. The association is desperately trying to cover it up, but that was to be expected. If even one of the 7 stars got hurt, it would attract national attention. but he finds it strange that Rue is asking him and not Nana. With that, the protagonist says he'll contact the guy's older sister, since he doesn't have any useful information. The guy then throws his phone on the ground, saying he made a huge mistake introducing his sister to Rue. The protagonist in turn thinks that someone might be investigating Nana's death and wonders if this could be a power struggle. He considers the possibility that these people might be connected to Nana's death. The next day, he goes to visit his master. Charlie says that Rue has changed a lot and almost didn't recognize him. Rue then asks if he passed the test. His master says yes and gets straight to the point. He says there's good news and bad news. The good news is that with his current state, Rue can only undergo one type of training. Rue asks what the bad news is. Charlie replies that the training will consist of learning how to get beaten up. Right after that, the protagonist is hit with such a violent punch that he's sent flying. Charlie tells him to remember that power. Once he can withstand that, he'll pass the training. The goal of this training is to increase his endurance. As long as Rue doesn't die, it doesn't matter how much he's hit. He'll live a long life. It's the same inside and outside the dungeons. Those who stay alive are the strongest, so you can't be called strong if you're dead. First, Rue must train with the training dummy. His master says he can dodge, but he must not strike back. After that, the training begins, and Rue dodges the dummy's attacks, until he realizes that running around won't help much, because the purpose of this training is defense. So he stops and waits to be hit. Rue remembers his master's words, and knows he needs to be resilient. With that, he takes a defensive stance and receives the dummy's hits. From afar, Charlie watches everything and likes what he sees. With this power, he says Rue can train both his speed and his physical endurance. That's why it's simple. Defense training is often considered useless. But eventually, everyone realizes that defense isn't just about physical strength. When he sees his phone ringing, Charlie answers and says he's only been sleeping 2 hours a night for the past week, and if he's asked to do one more thing, he'll lose it. On the other end, Rakuto says an S-rank dungeon has appeared in Nijiyasa village, and most of the village has already been swallowed by it. Charlie says that Kazami, from the 7 stars, gave the go-ahead. Rakuto says Charlie is really good at convincing people. He says it would have been easier if they still had bright light. Well, there's nothing we can do. We have to deal with this huge problem quickly. Charlie says it's impossible for an S-class dungeon to expand into other countries. They spent 2 whole weeks desperately trying to contain it, but he hasn't heard anything about it since last week. Rakuto asks when it's expected to happen. Charlie replies, in 45 days. He also says there's no point in worrying and that he wants to get it over with too. One of Kazami's key members is injured, and it will take at least a month for him to recover. That's a problem since you can't just replace his 7 stars. On top of that, Charlie says that apparently there's internal conflict in the Kazami family. The younger ones have disappeared. He feels bad for Kazami, who now has to find his siblings. 45 days later, a team heads to the dungeon, and among them is the protagonist. Until suddenly, one of the team members is shocked to see the dungeon boss. Right ahead of the team, the boss appears, a huge, monstrous rabbit. Quickly, the assault team charges in, and an intense battle breaks out between them. Meanwhile, the rest of the team stays back, waiting for the right moment to act. One of the warriors who charged in manages to catch the rabbit off guard and slays it. He says they've done it, and now it's time to move on. As the whole team pushes forward, a few eyes turn toward the protagonist. Rue thinks there's something off about them. They're way too fast. His teammate says their attack speed is really fast, and also notes there aren't many monsters around, so they should be careful. Then another team member shows up and tells Rue that he'll cover him, so he doesn't need to be afraid to move forward. The protagonist says he understands, but in his thoughts, he feels something is wrong. Right after that, a new monster appears. This time it resembles a playing card. The warrior leader says this is pure luck. Another group member asks what that is. The leader says he knows the enemy's traits, so he can help guide the exploration. He says this is an invisible monster, and 2 people need to be sacrificed to it. Rue then says that's why they brought 2 rookies with them. He remembers the day his sister complained about that too. Nana said the monster appeared and forced the group to vote on who would be sacrificed. She described the monster as looking like a card with a roulette. It made the group make a forced decision, which is why it's called the invisible monster. Rue understood that the monster was toying with people and asked if there was a countdown or something like that. His sister couldn't say after all. Everyone who saw it died. Her brother suggested that the monster must have forced people to fight each other, but Nana said some people didn't even seem surprised. Rue asked if at least the monster dropped a good item. She said no. So the brother asked what happened to the chosen one. Nana replied that the person chosen ended up being eliminated. Back to the present, the monster stands before the group and displays a screen with each of their faces. The protagonist's face ends up being highlighted because the older ones vote for him. As soon as the monster's countdown ends, it's time for it to collect the ones eliminated by the group. The creature gets excited and opens its mouth to devour them. The protagonist's teammate says there's no way to escape this. until Rue asks if he's just going to give up. The rookie says that monster is 3 times stronger than a guardian and doesn't believe he can defeat it. Suddenly, the protagonist throws the rookie out of the monster's sight. He knows the kid won't be able to fight, so he plans to face the monster alone. Rue says if the rookie wants to be a sacrifice, he should go alone. Because Rue doesn't give up, no matter who his opponent is. Outside, the dungeon portal grows larger and larger, and the village of Mizuyasu begins to suffer. Charlie stands by near the portal until Kazami-shun, one of the 7 stars, appears. He says that Tsuyoshi was sacrificed and wasn't strong enough as a captain. Charlie asks what happened in there. Kazami says there was an invisible monster that proposed a sacrifice among the members of his group. Charlie asks about the book. Kazami says he destroyed it, as that was the safest thing to do. Honestly, Charlie says he always feels uneasy confirming these things. He needs to verify the process, no matter who does it. He also says the Lucky Child is the greatest threat to humanity. The precious Lucky Child used the lives of 4S class and 17 A-class members to become a powerful assassin. Tsuyoshi is a strong boy. If he becomes the Lucky Child, Charlie will have no choice but to take the life of a member of the 7 stars. One of Kazami's teammates says it's time. He orders that it be reported to the chief that the highest rank in the dungeon may not be S-class. He also says he received this letter. In it was written that Bright Light had been revived. The protagonist protects the other rookie, but the monster doesn't go easy on him. This forces Rue to work even harder and endure the enemy's heavy blows. In the process, he gets injured. The monster gives him no time to recover and soon attacks again at full force. Rue thinks this power is incredibly strong and must be 5 times stronger than a guardian. If he's not careful, he'll be eliminated quickly. In other words, the monster is toying with him, like a wild beast playing with its prey before devouring it. He realizes the enemy can extend its limbs easily, so fighting from a distance is a disadvantage. The monster hasn't moved its main body even once during the fight. Rue then wonders if its weakness is being unable to move. To test this hypothesis, he stands in front of the monster and tries to attack it up close. At first, he manages to strike, but in reality, his blow didn't hurt the monster. Quite the opposite, because the creature bit the protagonist's sword and broke it like it was nothing. After that, the monster grabbed Rue's leg and lifted him, taking him out of the fight. Next, it throws the protagonist to the ground, badly injuring Rue's back. The other rookie says there's no way to beat the monster, so he asks why the protagonist keeps fighting. At that point, Rue can't answer. Then the monster takes the chance to lift him again and is about to devour him for good. Rue stares straight at his end until he remembers his sister. In a moment they shared together. 4 years ago, they met in a cemetery because Kasumi Ikoma, a colleague of Nana, had perished trying to save his wife in a dungeon. They were a great couple and always took care of each other. Rue tried to comfort his sister, saying that it wasn't her fault. Nana was aware of that, but ever since her friend passed away, the job had become harder for her as she kept imagining what it would be like to lose her brother one day. That made her very anxious, even though Rue told her not to worry. Regardless, Nana promised she would do her best to keep her brother safe, because to her, there was no meaning in living without him around. She also said she knew about Rue's desire to become an explorer, but as long as she was alive, she wouldn't allow it. Rue told her not to worry because he wouldn't do it. Nana then asked if he didn't feel frustrated about that. Her brother said no, because the most important thing to him was her. Back in the present, the fallen rookie gathers courage and charges in, and before the protagonist could be devoured, he cuts off one of the monster's arms. Rue saw what the boy did, but that also put the rookie at risk, and right after that, he was struck by the monster. Being thrown far away as a result, the rookie falls unconscious due to the blow. The monster is now free to attack again. Then it bites Rue next, but the protagonist thinks he can't die yet. He needs to uncover the truth about what happened to his sister. To Rue, no matter what happens, he won't let anyone stand in his way. He doesn't want to lose in any way, so he decides to retaliate the only way he can, and bites the monster back. Because to Rue, his goal is bigger than his pain. As soon as he manages to strike the monster, the creature drops him to the ground. While the protagonist lies there, the monster begins to disintegrate. Apparently, what Rue did struck the monster's weak point. He couldn't believe it worked himself, since he hadn't expected to defeat such a strong creature with just a bite. Either way, he had already thought he was done for. Until suddenly, Rue is healed. He notices the system screen has appeared before him, and in the window, a message is displayed, saying that due to the incident, a special healing item was automatically activated. Shocked by all this, Rue is speechless, until he decides to try interacting with the system and receive the healing offered to him. Some time later, the protagonist's system reveals that he has obtained a new skill called Extra Use. Rue says he found this on the day of the dungeon. He searched for more information, but hasn't found anything so far. The notification only alerts him about the skill and says nothing else, which leaves him even more confused. Then he receives a call from Kaoji, who invites him to a new dungeon. As soon as he arrives, the protagonist meets his friend. Rue apologizes for the delay, but Kuji says they won't enter yet and need to talk. He asks if Rue is okay. He replies yes, but in his thoughts, the protagonist knows he only recovered so quickly thanks to the system. Kaoji says a lot of people have been perishing in the dungeons lately, and tells Rue he needs a fixed team if he wants to enter combat as an explorer. But he says all the famous explorers already have their teams formed. Then the raid leader says it's time to enter, and Kuji tells the protagonist they can finish the conversation later. As soon as they enter the dungeon, they're surprised by the unusual scenery and wonder if something's wrong. Kaoji says this is a resource-rich dungeon with a relatively low-risk boss, but it's not good to stand idle in the back. One of the explorers gets excited after finding a mushroom and claims it's his lucky day, but as soon as he smells the item, he faints right after. Kaoji says it's not deadly, but collecting that item comes at a price. Then he apologizes for talking too much. Rue, in turn, says it's always good to learn more, so his friend says they can walk together until the end. While they explore the dungeon surroundings, Rue finds some strange items, and Kuji warns him about what he can and can't use. After that, the mission leader says the explorers have already taken care of the monsters, so she tells Kuji to handle the cleanup while she goes after food. Kaoji then calls his people to start the cleanup work. Next, the protagonist sees one of the items vanish from his hand, and he doesn't understand how that happened. Amidst all this, he's left confused, but Kuji says they can't waste any more time. The group approaches a fallen monster. The leader tells the support team to take care of it, while they head out first. 20 minutes later, the support group is already in action. Meanwhile, the protagonist thinks this dungeon is quite different from the last one, because while the previous one had minerals, this one has only plants and organic items. Kaoji says it's time to head back and asks if Rue already grabbed everything. He replies that he has, but just as he's about to leave, Rue trips on a rock, and while holding the items, falls to the ground in an embarrassing way. However, by accident, he touches the defeated monster. Somehow, this activates his ability without him noticing. With that, the monster's body vanishes from the spot, leaving the protagonist quite frightened. Kaoji says they only have 1 minute left before the shift ends. Either way, he tells everyone to exit before time runs out. As soon as they leave the dungeon, Rue says he has something urgent to do and runs off. Kaoji says it's fine and will transfer his payment soon. Once home, the protagonist checks his system and sees that it has an inventory. Soon he realizes that both the mushroom and the monster that disappeared ended up in there. That way, he understands that the ability he previously acquired allows him to store items in his inventory. With that, he concludes his luck has just changed, because if he uses this ability right, he'll be able to perform his tasks more efficiently. But he realizes he still doesn't have the strength to protect himself alone. So if someone else finds out about something this valuable, he plans to take advantage of it. So he starts thinking of a way to do that. Rue knows he's not strong enough to enter a dungeon alone, so his best chance is to stay in the back and touch fallen monsters after battles. But he knows that if he uses this ability in front of others, it will cause problems. So he concludes it's best to do it discreetly, though he knows that won't be easy. Then he thinks his friend Kaoji can help, and he also thinks he can use this to repay Kaoji. Far from there in a wealthy area, the rookie injured in the dungeon is recovering, until he receives a visit. His older brother asks why he argued with their father. The boy says it's his life, and it has nothing to do with his brother. His brother says that if the kid decides to risk his life or anything else, he won't interfere. But he says if he still cares about his family, he should value his life. Being an explorer isn't the only thing in life. The boy tells his brother to wait, and says his wish is to abandon the Kazami family. Back to the protagonist, he resumes his training routine. Meanwhile, he thinks that to dismantle more monsters, he needs Kaoji to cooperate with him in 2 things. One is to create multiple fake identities and switch between them and his real one. This way, even if he messes up, the risk level drops. The second is to have him purchase a dungeon. Even a D-rank forest is richer in resources than a C-rank desert. The items produced in a dungeon depend on the environment. That's why some explorers sell dungeons, but if you don't use a trustworthy buyer, you often regret it later. Rue needs someone reliable with wide connections, and that's what he's looking for now. To his surprise, the kid from the Kazami family approaches him. The protagonist recognizes him from the dungeon. Then the boy introduces himself as Yashikage Kazami and says Rue saved him before. Now he asks if he can go on adventures with him. The protagonist is surprised by the request. Yashikage Kazami says he admires the way Rue faces enemies, and although he doesn't see himself as strong as him, he wants to help in future adventures. Rue thinks this must be some kind of prank, but Yashikage insists it's not, and that he searched everywhere for Rue because he wanted to join him in future dungeons. The protagonist says there's no reason for someone to follow him since he's not some skilled explorer. Rue thinks that technically, the boy helped him too, so they're even. And there's also the fact he doesn't like people who give up easily. So he tells the boy not to follow him and says he never wants to see him again. Yasukage Kazami begs Rue not to go and says he won't give up. Later on, the protagonist meets with Koji, and his friend says that although he tried many times, he couldn't find a dungeon. But apparently, the dungeon spawn patterns are changing, and Koji says he worked hard to gather that info. Rue asks if dungeon appearances aren't supposed to be consistent. His friend replies that there's no such thing as something that never changes, and if this information is true, he's not sure whether it's good or bad for humanity. Then Yasukage appears, and Koji asks if he still hasn't given up after following Rue for nearly a month. The protagonist says he went into a dungeon with that kid once, and ever since, he's been following him around. So he walks up to Yasukage and says that just because they worked together in the past doesn't mean they have to keep doing so forever. Yasukage says he truly wants to help Rue become stronger and has no hidden motives. Rue states that he's just a scout. He knows the boy isn't an ordinary person and must have plenty of people he could be around, so he doesn't want to be bothered anymore. But Yasukage says he's seen many strong people before, but never anyone who strikes an enemy with full force in a desperate situation the way Rue does. That's why he wants to follow him, because he also wants to become that strong. Yasukage says that because of his personality and skills, he's constantly compared to his older brother, and he hates that. Rue thinks about this for a moment, and because of the boy's last name, he deduces that his older brother must be the famous Kazami. This triggers a memory in Rue from the day Nana showed him a photo of the 7 stars. She said one of the members insisted a lot, so they all gathered to take the picture. In the photo Nana showed, among the 7 was Shunshin Kazami. Back in the present, he asks if the boy is Shunshin's brother. He replies that he is. For the protagonist, things are starting to make more sense. But he thinks the personalities of the Kazami are totally different and wonders what goes on in that family. He says he'd love to fulfill the boy's wish, but he just wants to live a peaceful life, and states that he doesn't accept younger siblings or partners who need help. Kauji takes the opportunity to say to Rue that they have a job to do, so the protagonist goes and tells the boy they'll see each other around. Inside, one of the group members asks how they're supposed to harvest something like that, and says that today is his daughter's birthday, so he needs to leave early. Rue says there's nothing wrong with that, and tells him he can go ahead and return first. He'll take care of the rest. So the man agrees and says that to thank him, he'll buy him a meal next time. The protagonist thinks that last time he only got common materials, so he's counting on this one to earn something good. Now that he's alone, he takes the opportunity to store the items in his inventory. Then he receives an alert from his system saying that Bronze Body has been acquired, and this ability can increase the physical durability of an item. Rue thinks that if he combines that with his defense art, his physical durability will be even greater. After that, one of the men returns and asks what Rue is doing. He says he didn't have time to clean everything, but there's no monster body there anymore. So he asks Rue where the monster that was there went. Caught off guard, the protagonist tries to play dumb, but the other worker doesn't buy it, shows his watch to say he knows how to tell time, and demands an explanation. Rue thinks, what kind of excuse exists for a monster disappearing before it was supposed to? He wonders if there's anything he could say to convince him, but even if the worker believed him, he still wouldn't be satisfied. So he says he also just got there and has no idea what's going on, and since monsters are vanishing, he wants to get out of there quickly. However, the worker doesn't believe him and punches the protagonist. He says he saw the monster die with his own eyes just minutes ago. He also says this is Rue's last chance to tell the truth. The protagonist doesn't just stand there. He decides to fight back and strikes the man in the abdomen. After that, he knocks the guy out and leaves him out of commission. Rue picks up his dagger again, saying he gave the man every chance to turn around and get out of his way. In a brief moment, the man manages to see the protagonist walking away. He can't believe what just happened, so he wonders if the rumors going around are actually true. Back at home, Rue washes his hands, but something is bothering him. He can't look at his reflection in the mirror, because it's as if he himself is judging what he sees. In anger, he punches the mirror, since he can no longer look at himself without feeling guilt. The fact that he struck someone so badly, to the point of leaving the guy to die, bothers him deeply. Rue thinks that in a world where it's unclear if the law even works, eliminating someone is nothing unusual. However, taking someone's life is still wrong. He doesn't want to make excuses for what he did, but he also won't let anyone interfere with his plans. 1 month later, he's back in the dungeons. One of the men there says Rue took a while and thought he might have gotten stuck inside. He says he twisted his ankle a bit, that's why it took longer. The other workers tell Rue not to push himself too hard so he doesn't get hurt. They even ask him to deliver the collected items to the explorer. One of them asks if Rue is going to do that alone. The older man says Rue is trustworthy and always helps when they need him. He's honest to the core, would never steal a thing, and people fight to work with him, lining up for the chance. So he tells the younger one to stop messing with Rue every time, saying even Buddha only forgives 3 times. The younger one says Rue can't really get mad, since he heard he's the brother of Shining Light from the 7 stars. With that, the older man says Rue has no reason to work in a dump like this if that's true, but it's been a long time since he heard Shining Light's name, and he wonders what happened to her. Back to the protagonist, he asks how long the boy plans to keep following him. Yashikage thinks he's hidden, and that can't be directed at him, but to his surprise, the protagonist appears and says he's talking to him. The boy gets startled badly and ends up hitting his head on the wall, leaving him with a big bump on his forehead. Yashikage asks how Rue found him. The protagonist says the boy is predictable. Rue says this is a warning. If the boy keeps following him, he won't hold back. The protagonist thinks his heart is tired too, and the boy should give up and go home. But seeing the protagonist walk away, he begs for one more chance, saying he can be useful. Rue asks what the boy is talking about, and says he doesn't see any value in the help he's offering. However, Yashikage says he can sell items under Rue's name. With that, the protagonist asks if the boy's been investigating him. Yashikage claims it was by chance, and he noticed Rue was selling something. He also says he has connections and won't meddle more than necessary, and he'll try to be as useful as possible. Rue thinks the boy has no strength, but he has enough value to make up for it, and if he keeps selling on his own like this, someone will eventually notice. So maybe teaming up with this boy isn't such a bad idea. Right after, something interrupts his thoughts because he hears a noise. Yashikage says this should be a safe zone, so an explosion like that shouldn't be happening. After that, the two of them see a clash on a nearby rooftop, until Yashikage realizes his brother is involved. Shunshin Kazami is fighting an enemy. His opponent says he didn't expect to face a member of the 7 stars. Without saying a word, Shunshin makes a move, but it's a warning strike. The enemy says Shunshin is quick with his hands, and asks why they don't chat for a bit. He says Shunshin must be curious to know who he really is, where he came from, and what his goals are. But Shunshin says none of that matters to him. The enemy says he's just a flashy villain making a dramatic entrance. Since he went to the trouble of earning his place, Shunshin might as well cooperate. With that, Shunshin says he'll cooperate by defeating his enemy. He draws his magic sword and says this is just what he expected from the divine right, so relentless. The enemy says that's not very nice, but he's a villain, so he thinks they both have to do this. With that, a battle between them begins. When attacked, the enemy tries to defend. Shunshin, on the other hand, counterattacks, but an explosion occurs because he gets hit. However, he takes advantage of the lingering smoke in the air and tries to catch the enemy by surprise. The enemy manages to block it. However, Shunshin surprises him again and appears beside him unexpectedly. Shunshin manages to injure the enemy because he used 2 swords at once. The enemy says that's new information. Shunshin replies that's good. His enemy asks what he should do next. Then they resume the fight. Seeing his brother fighting, the boy tries to run over there, but he's stopped by the protagonist. Rue says if the boy goes there without a plan, he'll end up getting eliminated. He also says that if he really cares about his brother, he should prioritize his own life first. Rue thinks that to go toe-to-toe with a 7 stars, the enemy must be very powerful, so he wonders who that guy in the white robe is. He decides to take a picture of the man. Yashikage says he knows hiding is the smartest move, but he really doesn't want to just stand back and watch. Rue then says he's going to do something. After that, he heads home and the boy follows him. The protagonist says that if he finds anything out, he will contact Yashikage with the answers, and slams the door in his face. Yashikage is annoyed that he wasn't allowed into the house. Regardless, Rue studies the mysterious enemy. He examines the photo he took and uses it to search for more information, until upon closer inspection, he notices something unusual, because near the enemy, there was a smaller enemy further away. Rue then tries to figure this out. He makes a call and asks if his contact saw the photo. 30 minutes later, he receives a return call, and Rue asks if his contact found anything. The contact says that this is the explorer Komori Yaman, and the design is based on his pet cat, whose death was confirmed last August. Rue understands that the contact is saying Komori died, not that he fell in combat. The contact confirms, saying Komori wasn't killed in a dungeon. He died near the entrance of an A-rank dungeon, and his body was in a terrible state. But the culprit has yet to be identified. He asks where Rue saw that emblem. The protagonist asks why the question. The contact says he doesn't know where Rue saw it, but tells him that if he sees that kind of symbol again, he should stay away, because if he's not mistaken, that mark means plunder. The protagonist asks what that's supposed to mean. His contact asks if Rue genuinely didn't get it, or is just pretending not to. He says it's a symbol of victory, and there's no other way to explain it. Rue asks if there's any other clue about them. The contact says if Rue asks nicely, he'll answer. So the protagonist politely asks, The contact reveals that stealing someone else's emblem and keeping it as a trophy is a practice only done by a group called crews. That man in the footage is even more shrouded in mystery than the leader of crews. All that's known is that he's called Z, and nothing else is known about him. Rue asks if he's talking about that bizarre organization. His contact is surprised he's already heard of crews. The protagonist says his sister had mentioned them before. The contact says he must know they're an international group with a very complex structure. What matters is that they're absolutely insane, but also very tightly knit. He then says that if Rue is planning to investigate them, he should drop it. Otherwise, no one will be able to protect him from the danger. But the protagonist doesn't care and asks if his contact has any more information. The contact says that the news about Nana has already spread in certain circles, and as far as he knows, it will probably go public soon. Rue asks where he heard that. The contact replies that it's the Daisy Trading Company. He also says they deal in information but aren't shady enough to sell that kind of thing, which is why he asked the president to reveal the details. Rue says he needs his contact to keep collecting information about the unique collectible trophy, just enough to avoid getting hurt, and states that if the news about Nana spreads, he'll have to move. His contact says Rue is surprisingly calm about all this. The protagonist hangs up before he can finish. Rue thinks that he started preparing the moment he suspected Kauji had leaked Nana's death and didn't expect the association to fully cover it up. He's just glad they weren't using Nana as bait for profit, because that would have changed his plans. The next day, he returns to his routine and goes to his master's gym to train with the training dummies. Rue is making steady progress and is even fighting more than one opponent now. After finishing his daily session, Charlie shows up and praises his performance, and he thanks his master for the appreciation. Rue thinks the system improvements were pretty obvious, but his master says he's only been around a few times anyway. Normally, someone with Rue's body type, no matter how talented, wouldn't be able to take on 2 training robots in such a short time. Charlie says he won't ask what happened because that would be nosy, but he is curious why Rue showed up today. He says Rue isn't there just to train because he's not that stupid. The master says the protagonist should listen to him. He has something to say about the older Kazami, who almost became a disaster. Charlie says Kazami nearly destroyed the entire city of Meikyu. He may seem calm, but once he loses his head, it's over. That fight with White Robe was nothing. White Robe was strong, the only one who ever pushed Kazami that far. The point is how he provoked Kazami, because as a result, Kazami was on the verge of losing control. Charlie says Rue probably heard from his sister that Kazami is the strongest of the 7 stars, but that assumes he's not being restrained. The truth is that Kazami is the only 7-star with a limiter. If he uses everything, he turns into a mass extermination machine. Rue thinks the 7 stars rankings were based on power. Nana was the strongest, but at the same time, they said Kazami was the true strongest. He then asks why his master is telling him this. Charlie replies that he thought that's why Rue showed up there. Rue says it's not, so his master asks if this is about White Robe. The protagonist says yes, and that he wants to know everything about this enemy. Charlie says that to tell what he knows, there has to be a good reason. So Rue says Nana died in a dungeon, and Charlie must already know that. Charlie confirms and reveals he was planning to use Rue as bait to lure White Robe, but now says he should pull back, and the protagonist says he already knew that, and also knows Charlie is scheming to keep him in the dark. His master says he could tell Rue what he wants, but warns that this path has no return, and along it lies only misery, which goes against his sister's wishes. He reveals that White Robe is a member of a completely unknown new group. Saints and the 7 stars are now being forced to choose a new member. Rue asks why bring in a rookie all of a sudden. Is it because of the Saint? Charlie says yes. He doesn't know the Saint's full history, but the objective is clear. Rue asks if he's targeting all Seekers or just the 7 stars. His master says that even if the enemy eliminates all the Seekers, he'll still have to face the 7 stars. On the other hand, if he eliminates the 7, the rest becomes easier. Rue says they don't know the enemy's past, but they do know his codename, and that's strange. But his master says villains love to give themselves titles like that. The protagonist asks if there's some sort of cult that worships a dark god. Charlie says there are pretty much always fools like that in every era. Rue asks if anyone chose to worship Shining Light. His master says Rue must be wondering, if there's a saint-level threat out there, is it really necessary to find a replacement for her so soon? He says he worries about his student and doesn't want him to break down. The protagonist says that to him, Nana isn't Shining Light, member of the 7 stars, but rather his younger sister. Charlie says that's exactly what he'd expect from his student. Way better than some brocon. The 7 stars are the strongest shield and spear of the nation. If Nana's death is revealed, the country will certainly descend into chaos. Rue doesn't like hearing that, but Charlie says it's the only way. The protagonist understands what his master is saying, but he doesn't agree with hiding it forever. He knows they're planning to choose someone to take Nana's place. That way, as far as the public is concerned, Nana is still alive, and all the news about her death becomes nothing more than a lie. But he has other plans in mind. Charlie says the Seeker tournament schedule has been moved up. Apparently, several countries have formed alliances and are keeping an eye on Rue. The protagonist claims his master never intended to listen to his opinion on this, so he should stop acting like a mediocre leader. As he leaves, Charlie says he hates this kind of situation. Shortly after, the protagonist arrives at the place he was looking for. He thinks he can't go to the guild for a while. Self-training has its limits, and beyond that, this is all he has left. Since he paid a fortune for this information, he doesn't want to be disappointed. He starts thinking the Daisy Trading Company is amazing, because he never imagined they'd find an entrance in such a remote place. Either way, he continues his journey, until he picks up a stone from the ground, and get thrown far away. This ends up attracting the attention of a monster shark that lived nearby. Rue was planning to use this place for training, but now that he discovered this monster, he realizes it won't work, so he walks over the rocks, trying to avoid touching the water. But in the middle of that, the shark tries to attack him. The protagonist manages to dodge the ambush, and thinks this kind of thing doesn't happen every day. To make things worse, several other sharks appear, as if one wasn't trouble enough. Rue finds himself surrounded by all of them, until one of the sharks approaches and he pushes it away with a punch. After getting away from the water, he gives thanks that amphibians don't appear in E-rank dungeons, otherwise there'd be no way to handle so many. However, Rue celebrates too soon. Because the monster sharks leave the water and are able to walk on land, he's completely caught off guard and immediately tries to find a way out of this. Some time later, he takes a break and sits on the ground. In a way, he's thankful the fight was on land, because if he had been dragged into the water, he wouldn't have survived. He takes the opportunity to send the defeated monsters into his inventory. And not only that, he also collects the rewards for the kills. According to what people say, aquatic monster pearls are good for the skin, but Rue asks who would use something so disgusting. Getting 2 pearls from all those monsters isn't too bad, as he says even bosses have low drop rates for rare items. That's more or less what Rue expected. Next, he comes across a butterfly, which is also a boss. Butterfly species tend to be deadly. Their scales often cause hallucinations, and the real danger is that they can be poisonous. Rue then tries to lure it out once. He throws his dagger and hits the creature. Then, around the lake, something nearby begins to react to it. It's a kind of prize that appears. The protagonist grabs another of his daggers and throws it, because he thinks there's no way that butterfly is just decorative, and that the swarm of fish is the real threat. He breaks the supposed prize, and goes over to the butterfly to try to pick it up, thinking that if this had been the real boss, he might have died. But as soon as he collects the butterfly, his system issues an alert, saying that one day he'll have an unexpected encounter. The protagonist is in another day of training, but during his run, his friend Kauji approaches him. Rue asks what the visit is about. His friend says that Rue is getting stronger every 6 days and is looking for a reliable team, so he thought of introducing him. Kauji says he'll send their contact info later, but then asks why Rue is collecting the corpses of dungeon bosses. Since dungeon patterns have started to change, no one is selling them anymore. To destroy more corpses, Rue had been asking Kauji for information about it. His friend says he's been a huge help with the intel provided, so at the very least, he wants to know what Rue's current connection to Nana is. He says he's heard rumors that something bad happened to Nana, but apparently the case was silenced to avoid panic. Rue says the guild will handle it quickly, and besides, Nana said her mission would be over soon. When she comes back, Rue says the 3 of them will eat together. Leaving that behind, Kuji asks what Rue has been up to. He replies that he's been training a lot. However, he leaves out an important detail, that this training has actually been happening inside the dungeons. Kauji only knows half the story, but says that based on Rue's condition, his training is paying off, since he looks stronger. Then he says goodbye and tells him he'll see him later. In turn, the protagonist wonders if, by any chance, he had been stronger, could he have undone what happened to his sister? Either way, he goes back home, and runs into Yashikage again. The boy says he's been waiting for Rue for the past 10 days, but as soon as the protagonist enters his house, he tells Yashikage he can leave now. Yashikage, however, never loses hope, and the protagonist asks if he's always this friendly with everyone. Rue says he was thinking about the boy's suggestion, that they go into a dungeon together, but he says he'll have to decline, claiming he's not as strong as the boy thinks, and if he doesn't understand that, there's no point in talking. Rue states he's not necessarily a reliable ally. What matters is whether the boy can handle it. Yashikage then asks how exactly they're supposed to cooperate. The protagonist says he needs the boy to sell something over a long period, and he'll receive 30% while Rue keeps the rest, but there's one condition. He doesn't want anyone to know he's involved in this. In return, Rue offers to help plan the boy's training. Yashikage accepts immediately and runs to hug Rue, but the protagonist stops him and says they're just working together, Nothing more, so the boy can go back home now. He gives his contact to Yashikage, and the boy says he'll be waiting for the messages. 7 days later, the protagonist goes after a dungeon. He knew it was far, but didn't imagine he'd have to cross the country to find it. This time, they bought information about 3 E-rank dungeons from Daisy Trading. They're in remote areas, very far from one another. Dungeons in good locations are in high demand and rarely appear. Besides that, with the changes in patterns, Daisy Trading has been selling fewer dungeons. Ryu didn't get any good responses before he left, but he hopes there will be good news from the younger Kazami brother. As soon as the protagonist enters, he encounters one, but he doesn't have much trouble defeating it. He wonders why there's a snake there, since it's not common for normal animals to appear inside dungeons. He figures this might have happened due to the dungeon pattern changes, so he decides it's best to finish as quickly as possible. Then he continues his journey until he walks through a portal and finds himself in a place very similar to the real world, but the feeling inside is different. Then Ryu is attacked from behind. Shortly after, some snake monsters come at him. He uses his dagger to fight and also uses hand-to-hand combat. He even throws one of the snakes far away, but he decides to retreat as the number of monsters keeps growing. After running into the woods, the protagonist looks back and sees that the monsters gave up chasing him, so he decides to move forward, hoping the materials he'll find are worth the effort. However, as soon as he enters a cave, he comes across a person and wonders if that's a humanoid monster. That type of monster is very rare. They're usually stronger and smarter than the others. Details are unknown since everyone who encountered one perished. Then the creature spots the protagonist and asks if they've met before. Ryu wonders what that means, and since he didn't get any notification from his system, he considers the possibility that this creature isn't a monster. He's unsure since his sister once mentioned monsters that ask questions. Their strength changes depending on the answer. Get it wrong and they grow stronger. Get it right and they weaken. The elf, in turn, says he wants to watch all 4 of these movies but can only choose one, and asks which one should he pick. Ryu wonders if this guy is really doing this. He's not attacking, so the protagonist can't see his status bar. He thinks he can barely survive an E-rank dungeon alone, so there's no way he can beat something like this. He then wonders if he should play along. Ryu then asks, why not watch all the movies? The elf says good things should be enjoyed slowly, so the protagonist asks what kind of movie he likes. The elf replies that he likes all of them. Then Ryu suggests he use a die to decide which one to watch. That way, the decision can be made impartially. The elf asks how to use it. Ryu thinks he shouldn't let his guard down, and playing along may be his only way out, so he demonstrates how the die works. Upon seeing the number, the elf says that's the movie he most wanted to see and thanks his luck. Meanwhile, the protagonist remembers that before, the elf said he wanted to watch all of them. Wary, he takes a battle stance. The elf asks what's wrong. Ryu replies, nothing, but he asks what the elf plans to do now. He responds that he's looking for a suitable gift for Ryu, then asks what he would like to receive. Either way, he rips out a page from his book and says it's a thank you for Ryu's help. The page flies toward the protagonist and transforms into a wristwatch. The elf says humans usually get things like this, so he figured Ryu would like it. He thanks him once again and says he hopes to meet the protagonist again in the future. Ryu is confused. He's never heard of a monster giving a gift to an explorer. Anyway, he's able to analyze the watch through his system, and there's no doubt about it, because the elf is the most dangerous humanoid Ryu has ever seen. But everything he said sounded so genuine, and he even handed over a rare item like it was nothing. So the protagonist wonders, who is he? Far from there, in the capital city of Seiyu, a battle is taking place in the arena, and the protagonist's contact is watching. But he's bored since the fighters are pretty weak, until he decides to check his phone, and notices a few missed calls from the protagonist. He finds it strange, since Ryu isn't the type to do that, so he decides to call back. When he answers, he says he was watching a match in the arena and asks what Ryu wants. The protagonist asks what he knows about humanoid monsters. His contact gets startled and asks if Ryu found one, but the protagonist tells him to just answer the question. The contact says monsters like that are rare and little is known about them. Even 7 stars rarely encounter them, so there are no official records. Dungeon records are rare items that detail the characteristics of the dungeons they're found in. They're 100% accurate and highly coveted by everyone. Ryu says the encounter he had seemed dangerous, but he wasn't attacked. His contact asks if he killed the monster. The protagonist asks if that would be a problem. The contact says yes, because if his guess is right, that was Litz. He says Litz is a strange humanoid without a profile. No one knows his real name, but it is known that he gives rare items to those who find him. 5 years ago, someone met him and received an item that could stop time for 3 seconds. Ryu asks why that information never went public. The contact gets distracted by some rookies and asks why they're acting so wild. Ryu says they're competitors in the adventure tournament, so his contact asks if he knows anything about that. He says he does, but asks who's organizing it all. As they talk, he tries using the watch and notices that just like in a game, it seems to decide numbers on its own. His contact says he doesn't know who's organizing it, just that the 7 stars are present. Rue asks if all 7 are there. The contact says no, only KU Fischl and Tenki North. He says Fischl is about to explode and claims that if he had to choose from that group of weaklings, he'd be pissed too. He then says he has to stop Fischl before he blows up. After hanging up the call with the protagonist, the contact thinks that normally they don't spread info about Litias because they don't want people to get the wrong idea. He ended up forgetting to mention that to Rue, but figures he'll be fine. Elsewhere, at the Adventurer Association headquarters, Charlie ends a call and says he'll take care of everything later. Then he asks about the person he's waiting for. Judasaki Kai, president of the Adventurer Association, says that Charlie needs to be more patient. Charlie says he's been waiting for hours already and claims that it must be good for Fischl, since he's always late. Fischl says that's not true, and he only showed up late because he was busy with other things. Then Kay says he needs 2 things. First, he wants Fischl to select the participants, and as for Charlie, he wants him to investigate something, but both end up refusing the request. Kai asks why they don't want to help. Fischl says training those weaklings is a bad idea. They'll probably get eliminated, although he still thinks it's more honorable than losing in that tournament. The old man asks about Charlie then. He replies that he doesn't have the time or investigative skills. He just wants to go home. Kai sees a notification on his phone and says everything's ready. They have 3 days to complete the task. He states that this is an order. Unhappy, Fischl says only the alpha should be giving orders. The old man says kids don't know how to behave. Charlie, in turn, says that if he's forced to train bad students, it'll be worse for everyone. He asks if there's any specific reason for all this. Kai says he's curious about something and asks who Charlie gave the information about Litias to. With that, Charlie stops complaining and says he'll do the task. Then the old man says they need Charlie's instincts and strength, so he better deliver good results. Far from there, at the Kazami residence, the protagonist is helping Yashikage train, but realizes it's his first time doing this. Yashikage says he runs every day. Rue asks how much. He replies a few thousand steps. Rue says there's still time to back out, and claims that even if the boy doesn't become an adventurer, he can still live a life worthy of admiration. Yashikage says it's not like he's been slacking off, since he had a serious illness when he was younger and has been weak ever since, but he says he won't use that as an excuse. Rue asks if there's no way to cure it. The boy says he's already done everything he could, even sought out healing-type adventurers. Rue says dungeons are full of rare items, like a panacea. But Yashikage says items dropped in dungeons are all about luck, and many people are after the same things. No one would even reveal it if they found one. However, he says there was someone willing to make a deal, a kind of monster. Immediately, Rue wonders if he's referring to Litias. He pretends not to understand, but the boy says that monster is extremely mysterious. All he knows is that one of the 7 stars met him some time ago. For some reason, they ended up talking instead of fighting. The weapon the Alpha uses now was received back then. He says others have also met Litias, and claim that he not only gives away rare items for free, but also engages in equivalent exchanges. Rue thinks the information he got from Charlie didn't mention anything about trades, and wonders whether that was left out or if his master also doesn't know about it. He asks if it's okay to borrow the village for a while. The boy says yes and asks if Rue is going to train alone. The protagonist confirms he is. Meanwhile, he thinks that most combat-related resources are owned by the association or guilds. Rue doesn't want to owe the association anything or be tied to any specific group, but he thinks he can try buying them on his own, because unless he absolutely needs to, he prefers not to touch anything his sister left behind. A few days pass after that, until he returns home, and the protagonist is caught by surprise. He sees that the front door has been destroyed, and as soon as he enters the house, he's attacked with a projectile. He narrowly avoids a direct hit. Looking into his living room, the protagonist sees Fischl von Mestis, and asks if that's how a member of the 7 stars treats people. Fischl says the protagonist must be that scumbag brother of Nana. Rue is not happy about that at all and demands his sister's portrait back. Fischl says he has no right to possess it. Rue says he won't ask again, so Fischl asks what he'll do if he doesn't get it back. The protagonist then tries to punch him, but Fischl blocks it and tells the protagonist not to be so full of himself. Rue didn't expect that, and immediately after, he's pinned against the wall. Fischl says the protagonist didn't even visit Nana's grave, so he can't call himself her brother. With all that provocation, the protagonist remembers his sister and her last birthday, and he doesn't think what Fischl is saying is fair, so he backs away from the 7-star member, getting close enough to strike back. Fischl dodges the slap he was about to take, but the protagonist was clever and used that only as a distraction, because his real move was a knee strike. After that, Rue lands another hit, this time a punch, right to Fischl's face. The cunning warrior doesn't like taking hits like that, but his provocation really got his opponent riled up. Rue manages to recover his sister's portrait and asks who Fischl thinks he is to say he's not a good brother. He also says he doesn't want to hear any more insults from some stranger and orders Fischl to get out of his house. In turn, Fischl reveals that the last time he saw Rue, he was the kind of guy who got winded just going up and down the stairs. Fischl had been observing Rue before confronting him and thought he was just a weak kid. But now, having seen his strength up close, he asks if Rue waited for his sister to die before getting strong. He also asks if Rue has heard people saying Nana was stupid for risking her life to support a useless brother. Fischl says that unlike Rue, he's a respectable explorer and risked his life many times for Nana ever since she joined the Seven Stars, so he feels he has every right to say everything he's said so far. He says he was always by Nana's side, except on the day she died, claiming that if he had been there, she'd still be alive, and that's why he blames himself for not protecting her. Fischl is devastated by what happened and feels guilty. So Rue asks why he wasn't there that day with his sister. He replies that Nana used to say her older brother was the kindest person in the world to her, but he thinks she didn't know how cold Rue really was. Rue says that Fischl has no right to stick his nose into the relationship between siblings and just wants to know why he wasn't there that day, but if he doesn't want to talk, he can leave. Fischl hesitates, wondering why Rue wants to know that, imagining he might be planning some kind of revenge, but the protagonist says he doesn't believe that Nana sacrificed herself. He says that Nana had an item that allowed her to instantly escape the dungeon, but Fischl doesn't believe she would have used something like that. Rue says it's not that simple, and claims that Fischl knows better than anyone that special forced escape items don't have strict conditions. Fischl then says someone must have done something to prevent her from using it. Based on Nana's personality, Rue says there's no way she would have used it to abandon her comrades, because she would never leave her teammates behind and escape alone. Still, Fischl says there were no traitors in her team and he'd bet his life on that statement. Rue suggests that someone might have used a special item. When someone enters a dungeon, it becomes temporarily sealed. If someone used a special item to force entry, the boss's stats would double. Fischl realizes that would turn an otherwise easy boss into a serious threat. Rue says 7 Stars movements are ultra-classified, so either there's a traitor or the enemy's intelligence network is divine. If there wasn't an enemy, Nana might have been in a situation where she couldn't use the item. Special sealing type items put the dungeon in a lockdown state, eliminating all oxygen inside in under 3 minutes. Even if the core is destroyed, there's no escape, so she'd have to use a forced escape item. Rue thinks Nana might have given the item to help a teammate and stayed behind. Fischl says it's too much to take in and decides items like that are rare and hard to come by. But Rue says that for a 7 Stars member, that means nothing. That day, Fischl reveals he was supposed to go with Nana, but received a distress signal. It was from the son of a big shot, a weakling who had no business being in a dungeon. He investigated afterward for abuse of authority, but nothing else came up about that father and son. Fischl suspected that Nana had been tricked and someone had set her up, but there's no proof, so he doesn't understand how Rue can say for certain that Nana didn't die in battle, but the protagonist says his sister made a promise. She said she'd definitely come back, no matter what happened. With that, Fischl says he's starting to understand why Nana cared so much about her brother. Then he takes out a special item, revealing a sword that used to belong to Nana. She always carried it on missions, and now he thinks it's better if her brother has it. The protagonist thanks him for the gift, but he asks if the other members agreed with that. Fischl says he doesn't need anyone's permission to return Nana's treasure to her family. He also gives a card to Rue, and says he doesn't know what Rue is planning, but even if he's trying to uncover the truth behind Nana's death, with his current strength, he won't even reach the starting line. He also says he wasn't using his full strength against Rue, so he shouldn't get cocky about anything. As long as Rue understands that right now, combat resources are heavily monopolized, so Fischl believes he has to look after him in Nana's place. The protagonist thinks that if Fischl had been serious, he'd be on the ground from a single blow, and also thinks he'd like to learn a bit of swordsmanship. Then, upon looking at the card Fischl gave him, he finds exactly what he wanted, but as he's getting ready to leave, Fischl says Nana's successor has already been chosen, so Rue asks who that would be. Sometime later, the protagonist sets up a meeting with Yashikage. The boy apologizes for being late, but Rue says he doesn't need to worry, and asks if he's hurt. Yashikage says there was a weird guy attacking people, but he came out unscathed. Apparently, the guy was only targeting people with cars. But he says Rue doesn't seem surprised. The protagonist says that ever since the dungeons started appearing, lunatics like that have started showing up too. Yasukage agrees and says that surviving isn't easy, whether you're an adventurer or just a regular person. Either way, he wants to know the reason for the meeting, and Rue says he needs self-guided throwing knives and equipment that works with them. The boy says that when it comes to the equipment, the Daisy Company can probably help, but knives that can be controlled sound difficult. so they'll have to ask for the lowest price possible. By the way, he wants Rue's opinion on something, since he's thinking of starting a guild, but it's attracting the wrong kind of attention. Rue thinks that's fair but says you need at least 3 people to form a guild, and asks if he has anyone in mind. Yasuke says he'd like Rue to be part of his guild, but the protagonist thanks him for the invitation and says he's not interested. The boy then says he'll take care of Rue's request and make sure no one notices. Right after that, Rue is startled by something he sees. Yasuke sees his brother on TV and says he went all the way to the far south and came back in just 2 days. Alongside Shunshun are all the 7 stars. The protagonist watches it all seriously, especially when he hears some people talking about the rumors that Bright Light has died, and he's clearly upset by it. He remembers that Fischl said he couldn't reveal who's taking over Nana's role, but that it's the most pitiful and innocent person on the council. Fischl didn't want to force anything on Rue, because not even the 7 stars can change what's coming. He was returning to the capital shortly afterward, and said Rue would find out through the news, and if that frustrated him, Fischl advised that he get strong enough to stand alongside the 7 stars. Otherwise, he'd be left desperate once more by his own helplessness. Back in the present, Yasuke tells Rue not to let the rumors get to him, since there are always people talking nonsense. The protagonist says he's fine, but wants to know how the boy's training is going. Yasuke is caught off guard and didn't expect to be asked that now, so he tries to dodge the question. The protagonist says he's leaving because he has something to take care of and will contact him soon. With that, Yasuke says Rue is pretty cold, but thinks he'd be the same if he heard people talking badly about his own brother. At another time, the protagonist goes to the Fuwa fencing dojo, until others start watching him train, and mock him for not training with an instructor. But they know Rue is strong, even if they don't understand his training method. Soon after, Master Komoda appears, asking if Rue is done. The protagonist says yes, and is happy to see the master again. Komoda says that until now, Rue has only done basic movements for 2 straight weeks, but Rue replies that the master himself taught him that to become strong, one must master the basics. Then, Komoda says Rue can keep focusing on the basics or start real sword training, and asks which he prefers. Rue says the master told him to stick to basic movements for at least a month, so Komoda says he figured Rue was just a rich kid, trying to look cool with a sword, and says that when Rue decides on his training, he should let him know. The protagonist says he hopes to be guided by the master. Komoda likes hearing that. He says that in his opinion, the pinnacle of swordsmanship is just one thing. Then he grabs a sword from the wall and throws it at the protagonist. Rue is surprised by this, and the master says that is speed. If you're faster than anyone else, you can still win even with limited moves. Then he tells Rue to show how fast he can be. Rue thinks that just looking at the master's build, most would assume he's all about power. He thought that too, and throws his sword. The master says that was a fine strike, full of intent, but he easily defends against it. Rue thinks that speed comes from power. Unlike knives, swords aren't made to be thrown, and even so, there's not enough power behind it. The master says Rue is starting to understand things, and asks if he knows what comes next. Answering, the protagonist says he needs to train his speed more, not just sword skills. Komoda says that softness overcomes hardness, and asks if Rue is going in that direction. The protagonist replies that it's not just pure speed, he's aiming for balance, something more stable. Komoda says Rue isn't anxious or arrogant, and has the right mindset, but his swordsman's instinct tells him something feels off. The master says that lately there are many who fight dirty, and hopes Rue keeps his feet on the ground, and follows the right path, because he has high hopes for him. He says Rue should show his gratitude through actions, not words, and tells him to invite him to dinner someday, but for now, he's heading out. Before that, he has one last thing to say, and reveals that lately, some rich kids have been looking for Rue. So if he doesn't want trouble, it's better to hide for a few days until they give up. Sometime later, the protagonist went to an E-rank dungeon. He takes the opportunity to use the sword that once belonged to his sister. After defeating the monsters, he absorbs the body into his inventory. But this is the first time he finds something more exotic, and his system alerts him about it. Rue is a bit confused. Either way, he destroys the dungeon core, because he knows that regardless of anything, time inside is limited. Monster corpses can't be taken out, but they can be used inside the dungeon. In the early days, dungeon raids were hard, and the lack of supplies made some people eat monster meat, but many didn't survive. Now the protagonist understands better why, since monster meat can be like poison to humans. After leaving the dungeon and getting home, he received a call from his friend. Kauji asks if Rue will be free the next day because he's going to need a favor. The protagonist says he'll be available and agrees to help. He feels a bit concerned for his friend, but he knows that the bond between them is Nana. The next day, Rue goes to the dungeon to substitute for Koji, since he said he had an issue with his wife. The supervisor assumes the protagonist is just another inexperienced guy, since all he knows is that he's there at Kuji's request, and he explains some dungeon rules to him. After that, he says it's time to enter, because the work can't wait. However, as soon as they enter the dungeon, he's surprised, because the environment is very different from usual. While the others are scared, the protagonist thinks this is a hybrid dungeon, and that could be a problem. He wants to avoid any accidents. Starting from D rank, hybrid dungeons appear occasionally, and by combining 2 or more dungeon types, explorers don't like them much, because they break the internal consistency of the dungeon world. But this one specifically only has robot-type monsters, and it seems it's not fully integrated yet. The supervisor tells the others not to worry, because there's a supply station ahead. But one of them says there's nothing good inside. He knows this dungeon is narrow and notices that there are only robots and rockets in there, so he thinks it's not worth continuing the incursion. The leader tries to keep everyone motivated, but another group member panics upon spotting a UFO, until the leader realizes that among them, Rue is the only one who's not scared. The protagonist explains that he's seen things like that on the internet. Then the leader says they should just get the job done and get out of there as fast as possible. That way, he believes they won't have much trouble. On the other side, there's a group of explorers who have just defeated the boss, and they say the task was harder than it looked. Then, the support team arrives, and one of the explorers says the timing couldn't be better. The leader of the explorers tells one of them to destroy the dungeon core. Meanwhile, Rue notices that there are a lot of people around, and if he takes everything, they'll get suspicious. But bosses like that don't show up often. Then his thoughts are interrupted, because one of the explorers is attacked, everyone else is shocked. Then, an enemy appears. The remaining explorers are worried about their comrade, since he was caught off guard. Sarcastically, the enemy says he did them a favor by taking out that adventurer. The leader of the explorers attacks and asks who the enemy is, but the individual just dodges the attack without saying a word. Not only that, he counters, hitting the adventurer in the back. Then he removes the mask from his face and says he has no name, he's simply called 19. Then one of the explorers asks if he's from the abyss. 19 simply compliments the adventurer's perception. The one in charge of the support team says he'll hold off the enemy, and tells the others to find and destroy the core, because that's the only way. Besides that, he wants to protect Rue, because he promised Kauji he would, so if he dies, he won't be able to face Kauji again. Rue asks why the supervisor is doing this. He replies that a true leader cares about his team. After taking out all the explorers, 19 says he hasn't forgotten about the others. The supervisor says he'll take care of it, and the enemy praises his bravery, but says it won't help. Then the enemy attacks with full force. But before the supervisor can be hit, Rue manages to block the enemy's attack and steps in front of the supervisor. 19 then says that even in a pile of trash, sometimes there's something decent. The protagonist tells the supervisor to get everyone out of there. In turn, 19 wants to know if he's done saying his last words, since he says the protagonist is the clean fighting type, unlike him, a villain. Rue wonders if the opponent is from the abyss, and 19 affirms that he's already introduced himself. The protagonist thinks the abyss is entirely made up of ruthless scum. Their main business is illegal human trafficking and other unpleasant things, among various side jobs. Nana warned her brother about this, so he knows quite a bit. Next, the enemy attacks, saying that's bad, because just because the protagonist doesn't do surprise attacks doesn't mean he can be ignored. Rue is completely underestimated by the enemy, who even calls him an insect. Elsewhere, the support team is surprised to see Rue fighting the enemy, but the supervisor warns that they must stay focused, as the dungeon core still needs to be destroyed, and he's waiting for an opening to do it. Rue faces the enemy in a direct fight. 19 doesn't go easy on him, forcing the protagonist to show all his skills. Rue shows why he's been training all this time, and manages to counterattack an enemy who seems strong even by higher standards. 19 says Rue is better than he expected, which makes the fight more fun. Rue says that as a villain, he should know that villains who bark too much don't bite. 19 says that insects like him should stay crawling on the ground. Soon, their fight gets more serious. Meanwhile, the supervisor heads toward the core, and is just about to break it. But the enemy notices and tries to stop him. Rue goes after him and tries to attack from behind. But 19 quickly counterattacks. Only Rue was faster than him, and managed to land a hit before the enemy noticed. Now that he's wounded, Rue takes the opportunity to strike even more. Then he breaks the core, and tells the others to get out of there quickly. But the supervisor senses danger and tries to warn Rue. 19 rises quickly and appears behind the protagonist, saying he claimed victory too soon. Even injured, Rue has a strategy, and says maybe it's 19 who let his guard down too much. So the protagonist seizes the moment to attack. He lands a direct hit on the enemy, but it doesn't help much, because 19 is smarter than that, and used one of his abilities to become intangible. Not only that, but he went straight to the supervisor and attacked him, saying that luckily, Rue didn't die instantly. Seeing his teammate attack like that, Rue is shocked, since he didn't expect to be fighting a special ability user. Explorer abilities are divided into 8 types: physical, enhancement, magical, defense, control, support, utility, and special, and each type has subcategories. Rue's bodily ability is classified as enhancement. Among the 8, special type abilities are the most complex and defy common sense. The special ability Shadow controls up to 3 clones, each with about 70% of the original strength. Even if the enemy can only control 1 clone, Rue's chances of winning aren't even 10%. 19 says the protagonist clearly knows a lot, and now it's showtime, and asks if Rue cares about the lives of all these people. Cornered, the workers beg to be saved, and Rue doesn't know what to do. 19 says he has 1 minute to decide. If he doesn't answer, they'll all die. Rue looks at the exit portal, which is very close, but the enemy tells him not to even try, because he's watching him closely. The protagonist thinks he still hasn't uncovered the truth about Nana, so he can't die there. Then he wonders what he'll do to get out of this. The enemy pushes Rue against the wall, until the supervisor tries to speak up, but the enemy says he didn't give him permission to talk, and lands a blow on him, which makes the others very worried. 19 says he doesn't like hearing their voices, until the protagonist tells him to stop. The enemy says he's only doing this because he has no intention of hearing anything other than his opponent's answer. Rue tries to bargain to get the others released, but the enemy shows no mercy, until Rue says the enemy is afraid and claims he doesn't have the confidence to face him. 19 says his opponent is wasting the chance to live. However, the protagonist says it's only about 10 meters from there to the exit, and asks if 19 wants to try. The enemy asks if Rue is saying those guys are more important than he is. Rue says that if 19 tried to hurt them, he absolutely wouldn't be able to save them, just like if he ran for the exit, he wouldn't be stopped. In other words, the protagonist states that he was given a choice, and to begin with, the enemy never intended to let them go. Besides, there are still the copies. With that, the enemy tells the others to get out of there, because he'll fight Rue alone. The protagonist then sees the companions heading for the exit, and one of them tells Rue to come back home alive. As soon as they leave, the enemy charges toward the protagonist. He waits until the very last second, and quickly dodges the attacks. With that, he manages to strike one of the copies, until another one gets close. Rue is fighting all of them at the same time, and because of that, he ends up overwhelmed. He's hit and thrown far away, but he knows he can't give up. Then, before being struck again, he dodges. But another copy of the enemy was already expecting him to do that. Even so, the protagonist dodges once again, and the copies keep surrounding him. Rue then decides to focus on one at a time. In turn, the enemy asks if that's all he's got. Rue attacks one of the copies, but the real enemy appears behind him and catches him by surprise, wounding Rue badly in the back with a sword strike, and then pummeling him in close combat. Because of the injury, the protagonist loses his strength and can barely get up from the ground. The enemy's copies approach him. 19 says it's been a while since someone pissed him off this much. That's why he intends to give Rue the punishment he deserves. Then he takes advantage of the protagonist's vulnerable state and says he'll give him one more chance, stating that if he can reach the portal, he'll let him go. The protagonist thinks that he needs to stay alive, because the truth about his sister must be uncovered. However, the enemy attacks cowardly and laughs while doing it, saying there's no way for Rue to escape this suffering. The protagonist wants more than anything to reach his goal, and at this point, he can barely think straight. Sarcastically, the enemy congratulates him for still being able to move, until something surprises him. A girl says to 19 not to block the way, because she needs to go home. The enemy says he thought he had eliminated all the bugs, but the girl says she's not a bug, and just wants to go home. Then 19 says he'll only move if he's defeated. The girl then asks, "Is that all?" He confirms and says that if she defeats him, then she can go home. In that case, the girl says he's very annoying, and that she doesn't like people like that. 19 starts laughing at the situation, but that was his final act in life, since he got exactly what he asked for. Upon seeing this, the protagonist is shocked by the situation. The girl then approaches him and asks if he's also going to get in her way. Rue gets up and says he won't stand in her way. She looks at him with suspicion and asks why he isn't moving. The protagonist thanks her for the help and wants to know her name. The girl says she wasn't trying to help him, but says her name is Kenatu, and she's happy with the way she's being spoken to, claiming that people usually aren't that polite. Rue says he understands, but either way, his wish now is to go home. Kenatu wants to know if he's hungry too. Rue says yes. Shortly after, they go to a restaurant, and Kenatu doesn't hold back at all while eating. The protagonist in turn is fascinated watching her eat so much. He tries to order more food, but the waitress says they've run out of all the meat in the house. Ru then asks her to bring whatever they have. Shortly after, the waitress serves some pork, and that pleased Kenatu a lot. She then ate like she'd been starving for days. In the middle of that, the protagonist starts coughing, and Kenatu asks why, instead of eating, he didn't go to a hospital. Ru thinks he couldn't deny food to someone who was basically begging with her eyes, and now is eating non-stop. Come to think of it, he remembers that when he first met Nana, she was younger and had eyes like that too. Even though she never said out loud that she wanted meat, her eyes said it all. So he tells the girl not to worry and to keep eating as much as she wants, until a man appears and asks if Kenatu behaved well this time. He also says she was gone for so long, he thought she might have been tricked again, but he adds that if he got that much food, he wouldn't mind being tricked too. The protagonist doesn't know him, so the man introduces himself as Okamoto, a Kyuka affiliate. Ru wonders if he's talking about that strange private organization, the Explorer Association. Either way, he says that if Okamoto wants, he can join them for a meal. Without hesitation, he accepts and sits at the table. The girl asks if he's not thinking about eating her meat. Okamoto says they can all eat together, and if it runs out, this good man will just order more. So the protagonist orders more food and is grateful he has money. After they've eaten plenty at the protagonist's expense, Okamoto says it's been a while since he ate that much, and only now does he think to ask for his name. The protagonist introduces himself formally. Then Okamoto is shocked to hear Ru's name. Ru wants to know how he knows him. The guy says he's Nana Yuka's brother and claims Ru is famous everywhere. The protagonist doesn't know how he knows his sister. He says he always saw her on TV, and there's no one who doesn't know her. Seeing the girl dozing off, he says it's late and he needs to take her home. He invites Ru to come along, but the protagonist says no, as he has to return to his own place. Okamoto says having some level of caution is necessary, but if it's too much, Ru will end up becoming a lone wolf. He also says he's not going to snoop around weirdly, and Ru can feel free to follow him to his place if he wants. So the protagonist goes with him, and a short while later, they arrive at the place the man calls home, and says this is the Kyuka headquarters. As soon as they arrive, a woman smells the food, and Okamoto tosses her what he brought with him. The woman catches the food with joy. Okamoto calls her Yukin and asks why she's alone. She says some went out to work and others to look for Kenatu, and she decided to stay home. She also asks where he got the money for the food. Okamoto says this guy bought the food, so he invited him over. Yukin wonders how they met. Then she quickly walks up to the protagonist and says she knows his sister. Then Okamoto reveals that the genius who stole his position among the seven is Nana Yuku. After hearing that, Yukin asks if the protagonist is really Nana's brother. Ru realizes she knows him too, but Yukin says he's famous everywhere. So the protagonist asks if he's known for something good or bad. She replies that among the 7 stars, Yuku had the kindest heart. She never got mad, even when mocked in public. People used to say she was easy to bully, but then some guy mocked her brother and he was eliminated mid-conversation. Okamoto says that even though Nana never revealed anything in particular, at that moment everyone understood her brother was very important to her. Ru feels disheartened as he takes it in. Yukin says Okamoto just wanted to borrow Nana's power and nothing more, so she doesn't want to hear any nonsense from him. Okamoto says that's a baseless accusation and that he just provided information, though he admits her cautiousness is impressive. Yukin says it's surprising because Nana used to say her brother was a kind person, but the feeling now is completely different from what she described. Okamoto says that when he met Ru, he realized he's cautious, always looking for an opening to strike. That's the vibe he gives. The protagonist says that's enough, and he doesn't want to hear anything more about himself. Yukin says she's just sticking to the facts, and tells Ru he should ask himself why Nana was so strong, because her strength wasn't just about kindness or power. Ru thanks her for the advice but says he's leaving. She asks if he's not going to treat his wounds first. He says no, he'll handle it himself. After he leaves, both of them feel guilty for upsetting the protagonist. Okamoto says Ru is acting a little foolish, so he tried to cheer him up. Yukin says she's only lazy when it comes to thinking, but that doesn't mean she's stupid. She says prices have been constantly rising lately, and asks when was the last time Kenatu ate until she was full. With that, Okamoto says she should hold back while driving, but Yukin replies that it'd be a problem if he got in a bad mood. Okamoto says that guy, all covered in wounds, fed Kenatu, and he even thought the guy was luring her with meat to exploit her ability. But he was wrong. He truly just treated her kindly, and since he's Yuka's brother, there was no choice but to invite him to their home. He says that back then, Yukin was the main candidate to become the next 7, but she claims she doesn't hold any grudges or anything like that. Okamoto knows how much Yukin loves Nana. Otherwise, she wouldn't have become so withdrawn after hearing the news of Nana's death. That's why he introduced Ru. There's also Nana and the usual treatment, but he wanted her to meet one of Nana's relatives. Yukine says that's none of Okamoto's business. He admits he was wrong, but hopes the protagonist heard the warning. On the way home, Ru sees some children admiring food in a shop window. It instantly reminds him of when Nana was younger. She used to say that she wanted to grow up and earn a lot of money so she could give her brother a luxurious life, and she also wanted to get stronger so she could protect her brother. Ru then said he was looking forward to that. He also remembers what Yukine said, concluding that it's like putting the cart before the horse. Ever since Nana died, all he's thought about is getting stronger to uncover the truth. It's only been a few months since he became an explorer. His experience is still shallow, but all of this left a deep impression on him. Fighting against opponents stronger than him, and having companions willing to risk their lives, made Ru change his perception about a few things. While resting on a park bench, he remembers his sister again. Once she scolded him for overthinking things, and told him he had to relax sometimes. Then she asked if her brother really distrusted people. He replied that after everything that had happened to him, it was hard to trust others. Ru said his sister had seen more than he had, and she knew that people's true nature shows in moments of pressure. Nana stated that not everyone is bad. There are all kinds of people in this world, and there are even people who keep their courage no matter the situation. She wanted to change the world, and that's why she kept trying. Because she believed that if more people like her appeared on Earth, all of humanity could reclaim a peaceful world. So she told her brother to be brave and believe in humanity's potential. Back in the present, Ru says he doesn't like people who only think in schemes, but he interacts with everyone with distrust and caution. At this rate, he thinks he'll become a hateful person, because he doesn't believe he can change the world. After all, he hates the world without Nana. Even when cornered in a desperate situation, he hates humans who only think in calculations and betrayal. But still, Ru wants to fulfill Nana's wish. Therefore, he wonders if he should still believe in humanity. At another moment, Ru walks with Yasukage. They go to a poor area of the city, and the situation there is deplorable. Even Yasukage gets uncomfortable with everything. Noticing the boy's surprise, the protagonist says that this is the world he doesn't know. Yasukage apologizes, but Ru asks why, since he didn't do anything wrong. Then, a child bumps into the protagonist, and he tells the little one to be careful while walking so he doesn't bump into people. The kid says the protagonist seems amazing and asks if he's from the other side of the city. Ru says yes. With that, the little one asks if the other side is beautiful and if there's a lot of food there. He says yes, so the boy wants to know if one day he'll be cool like the protagonist, because his mom told him that at 15, he'll go to the other side. Ru says the boy will make it. Then the boy says his mom is calling and he has to go. The protagonist says goodbye to him and tells Yasukage that none of this is his fault, but now they need to keep going. Some time later, they arrive at their destination. Ru says that apparently this is the place. As soon as Yasukage looks to the other side, he sees a scene he never imagined before and says that this place looks like hell. Yasukage asks why those people are confined and why there's no one taking care of them, until the protagonist tells him to step back. The boy gets extremely frightened. On the other side, the people beg for food. Ru asks who they think they're dealing with. The old man says he assumes they're from the 7 Stars or the Explorer Association, but the protagonist says that's not the case. They step away, and Yasukage asks why Ru brought him there. The protagonist asks what he thought after witnessing all that. Yasukage says he never imagined a place like that existed. He says he didn't think the world was perfect, but the details were unknown to him until now, and thanks to Ru, he learned a little more about the world. Ru says this is the place where Nana used to live. The association would never allow this place to fall into ruin, and before Nana became one of the 7, it wasn't like this. He says Yasukage is naive, but not at fault. The truth is that Ru knows the real state of this world better than him, but he never cared about it. Ru says this country is divided into 4 areas, and this place has lost its value. The first is the district where the richest live, the second is the commoner district where he lives, and the third is the poorest district, exactly the one they've just arrived in. Yasukage asks about the last district, and the protagonist says it doesn't have a specific name, but people usually refer to it as the Grade District. The boy questions why these people are confined there, and Ru says he should ask that to his brother, because all he knows is that that's the rule. He also says Yasukage should reflect on the answer when he hears it. 3 days later, Yasukage is at home, until his older brother comes to his room, and when he turns on the light, he finds Yasukage sleeping on the floor, and asks if this is some new way of rebelling. Yasukage says he waited 3 days for his brother. While Shunshin gets ready to leave, he asks his brother what he's been doing. Yasukage asks Shunshin why there are people confined in the Grade District, saying he went there and didn't like what he saw at all. Since the people there live like zombies, Shunshin says those people are criminals. So Yasukage asks what he means by that. Shunshin says that ever since the dungeon descended, the world has been in chaos, and those people tried to profit by taking advantage of that chaos. He questions whether his brother doesn't think that's cruel, and asks how many people he thinks die because of those prisoners. Then he says that in the city of Mukku alone, there were 3,000 victims, including over 1,000 deaths, and there are many poor people living right next to them, who no one helps. So he says they might be locked behind iron gates, or maybe they're just struggling to live their own lives. Finally, Shunshin states that the residents of the poor district hate those prisoners more than anyone else.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.